Okay, so get this.
It's Law and Order meets like...
The Brothers Grimm.
Okay.
This concept is fairytale forensics.
I like it.
So think like criminology, psychology, maybe even a dash of engineering, all applied to these stories we think we know.
It's fascinating, really, because it's less about, taking the moral of the story at face value and more about really digging into the why. Why do these characters do what they do? What happens when we hold these fantastical events up to, the light of reality?
Right.
Using actual forensic techniques.
What?
To analyze these fairy tale events.
Okay.
Imagine dusting Cinderella's glass slipper for fingerprints or analyzing the structural integrity of Hansel and Gretel's gingerbread house.
Oh my gosh.
Using real world engineering principles.
Okay.
It's about grounding the fantastical in something tangible.
Right.
Encouraging us to ask, could this actually happen?
Right.
Even within a world of magic and make-believe.
We're talking about really dissecting those classic fairy tales like real-world investigative techniques. Things like skybound larceny. That's Jack and the Beanstalk, by the way.
Right. It's about using those investigative skills
Right.
to unpack the psychology, potential motivations behind these characters' actions.
Exactly. It's like, what if instead of just accepting that the evil queen is evil because, fairy tales, we dig into the why. Yeah. What's driving her jealousy and desire for power?
This approach encourages us to see these characters
not as these one-dimensional figures,
right,
but as complex individuals shaped by their circumstances.
Which makes you think about those classic stories in a whole new light. We haven't even touched on Beauty and the Beast yet.
Oh, and that's a big one.
Right.
This source questions whether their relationship, often romanticized as transformative love,
right,
could actually be seen as a case of Stockholm Syndrome.
Wow, I never even considered that angle.
It's like we're taking these seemingly simple stories and suddenly seeing them through a whole new lens,
right,
revealing all these complex layers.
And ethical dilemmas we never noticed before.
What about Snow White? That one seems more, surface level, evil stepmother, poisoned apple, the end.
You'd think so, right? But this digs deeper. Why is the queen so obsessed with being the fairest that she resorts to, attempted murder? What's that say about her mental state? And the seven dwarfs, are they all pure intentions? Or is there some exploitation in their relationship with Snow White?
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
Wow. It's like this approach makes you question everyone's motives. Yeah. Everyone has an agenda.
Right. And I think that's what makes this fairy tale forensics thing so interesting. It doesn't shy away from those uncomfortable truths.
It just makes you realize, as a kid, you hear these stories as adventures. But with this approach, it's like we can finally appreciate them on a whole other level.
A whole other level.
Because the source creator, who's a journalist, is very focused on the mechanics of the stories. So not just what happens, but the how and the why it happens.
It's like someone just handed us a magnifying glass and said,
go on, take a closer look. What did you miss the first time around?
And maybe even more importantly, who's holding the magnifying glass?
Oh.
This concept also pushes us to examine the storyteller's role.
Okay.
Whose perspective are we getting?
Right.
And whose voice might be missing from these traditional narratives?
All right. We're so used to hearing these stories from a certain point of view, usually the hero's journey,
right,
that we don't always stop to question
if there's another side to the story.
It's a reminder to always dig deeper, ask tough questions, and never stop challenging those ingrained assumptions.
It encourages us to consider the source.
Okay.
To ask ourselves, who benefits from a particular telling of events?
Right.
It's a good reminder that even those stories we think are
simple and straightforward can be far more nuanced and, let's be honest, a little messy when you really start digging beneath the surface.
And speaking of questioning assumptions, there's this one recurring theme in these tales that really struck me. It's the prevalence of, how do I put this, negligent, even dangerous parental figures.
That's a really astute observation. And you see it everywhere. Jack's reckless mother, right? Daedalus with his whole wax wings debacle. And of course, the manipulative stepmother in Hansel and Gretel. It's like these stories are holding up this mirror to the adult world, reminding us that even in fairy tales, children are often at the mercy of those who are supposed to protect them.
Yeah, it makes you reevaluate these stories. Suddenly it's less about teaching kids a moral and more hey, look at these messed up adults who have all the power.
It's like they want to give kids their own little detective kits.
Yes.
To navigate a world where not every adult is going to have their best interests at heart.
Which sadly feels particularly relevant these days. Maybe fairy tales can give us, and children especially, those critical thinking skills to actually navigate a world where there's some very real dilemmas Instead of sugarcoating it, let's get real, even with make-believe.
It reminds us that narratives,
Yeah.
whether they're ancient myths or today's news headlines,
Right.
are powerful tools that shape our understanding of the world.
Right.
By applying a critical lens to those narratives, we become more informed.
And discerning, recognizing that there's always more than meets the eye.
And that's the beauty of this fairy tale forensics approach. It's not about tearing down the stories we love,
Right.
but about enriching our understanding of them. I don't know about you, but from now on, I'm approaching every fairy tale, every story with a healthy dose of skepticism.
And a whole lot of curiosity.
Enough theory. Let's get our hands dirty, shall we?